Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Brever, and alongside me is Logan Camden. And the Minnesota Timberwolves are still alive, Logan. They come into Game 4 of the Western Conference Finals, down 3-0 in Dallas, and in yet another real barn burner of a game. This one goes down to the wire, as all four have, but for the first time, it is Minnesota who comes out on top in the clutch. What did you take away from this performance from them, Logan?
I mean, I expected this, dude. This is a team that has really answered the call when their backs have been up against the wall, man. Like there may not be a lot of dog down the roster in Minnesota, but Anthony Edwards is a hell of a dog, man. And I
Dude,
just wouldn't
there's
expect
a
this
fair
team.
amount of dog down the
Are you
roster.
sh-
Come
are
on.
you sure about that? Are you sure about that?
Absolutely. Their defensive identity is what makes them a great team. Think about all the performances we saw against Denver. It's not just Ant. Don't be the guy who gives Ant 100% of the credit for
I'm
anything. There's
not. I'm
too many of
I'm gonna
those
give him
guys right
100%
now.
of the dog element on this team, though, and I didn't expect him to lay down and go down without a fight, man. Right? This is a team that, when they have needed it, they have pulled from within themselves to win games with their backs against the wall, and they do it in this one. And finally, Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards outplay the duo of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving in this one. Ant ends with 29 points, 10 boards, and 9 assists on 11 of 25 from the field, 2 of 5 from deep. I think his best game in the series thus far. And he started out red hot. I just kept getting downhill so consistently, drawing fouls. I had 14 points in the first quarter, and I was a little nervous. You know, he disappears to that stretch in the second to third quarter, but he turns it back up in the fourth, hits some big shots, hits some big pull-up middies. But the start of the second half was Karl-Anthony Towns, and he's had an abysmal series heading into this game. We talked about it on last show. 15 points on 37% true shooting coming into this game. He was shooting 15 of 54 from the field and 3 of 22 from deep. In this one, he gives you 25 points on 9 of 13 from the field and 4 of 5 from deep. He gives you 20 points in the second half of his 25. 10 of them come in the third quarter. 10 of them come in the fourth quarter. And Karl-Anthony Towns powers two of the biggest runs for Minnesota in this game. An 8-0 Minnesota run in the third quarter where he hits a three. He finishes a layup off of a pick and roll with Conley and Gobert. And then in the fourth quarter, man, drives, gets doubled off of that drive, sets up Gobert for an easy dunk. He hits a couple of big threes, a catch and shoot off of an Ant kick out, another big one. And I want to give props to Kyle Anderson was setting all kinds of screens down there on the low block when they kicked out to the corner. And that just, it's a little thing, man, but it ups your shot quality on those shots so much more, man. By if that defender's cheating, like he's just not going to be able to close out. Like Cat's already a tall guy. That just makes that a completely uncontested, easy shot for Cat. And they needed it, man, right? Like you weren't getting a whole lot from Minnesota supporting cast in the way that we had been in earlier games in this series. It was a stark contrast. Like you needed your stars to turn up, and Cat does that. I have such a love-hate relationship with Cat, more hate just because I don't like his personality, man. I don't like how much he whines. And more importantly, other than that, it's just all the stupid fouls that compound in this game, man. The one where Kleba draws the charge on him where Cat is so obviously barreling down to the rim. He's got an over-the-back call. Like he's got that other one where he leaps into PJ and elbows him in the mouth. Like, I just wish Cat was a little smarter, man. He's so skilled. Ultimately, it doesn't come back to bite him in this one. Cat does enough, and he does foul out, but he gives him enough before he exits the game. And I don't think that last foul on Luka should have been called. One, I don't like those fouls where the offensive player is jumping into a defender, deliberately trying to draw the foul. Like, I just don't think referees should reward guys, foul grifting, looking like. That's my thing, man. Like, if it just happens naturally when you're attempting a jump shot, if he lands in your airspace, by all means, give them the foul. But Luka does that so consistently and gets it. I hate that basketball play. But the bigger thing to me, dude, was that Minnesota, if Dallas won this game, I don't think it was going to be on the merit of Dallas having a great game. I think it's the worst game they've played in the series. I think it was going to be more on Minnesota beating themselves in a lot of ways. Everybody is in foul trouble, not just Karl-Anthony Towns. Anthony Edwards is in foul trouble early in this one. Rudy Gobert, I think they all accrue 3 fouls before the end of the first half. There's a bunch of stupid turnovers. They end 14-13. That's because Dallas answers. They also give a few of them away, but Minnesota was not taking care of the ball well, and it cost them. Dallas wins this one 30-15 in points off turnovers, man. And so in a lot of ways, I feel like if Dallas was going to come out with this one, it wasn't great Luka and Kyrie like we've gotten in the clutch through these first 3 games. It was going to be Minnesota shooting themselves in the foot, fouling out, committing dumb turnovers and costly ones, and letting Dallas capitalize off of that one. But I do also want to give them props for the little effort categories that give them the marginal wins, man. So much better defensive intensity and ball pressure from Minnesota from the jump. Like Jaden McDaniels had just relentless effort on Luka throughout this game, man.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that the refs let them play a little more in this game too. I know it favors Minnesota, but they let them play a little more, let them be a little more physical. And I enjoyed that aspect of this game. And Minnesota capitalized on it, dude. I thought the defensive intensity and ball pressure was great from the jump and how they dominated the glass. I think it ends up 48-46 overall, but for the most part, Minnesota controlled the glass, and they control the offensive glass. 10-6, they win that battle. So the Stars play better. You get so much better defensive performances out of them. And I really felt like, Carson, that Minnesota should have won this game by more. Like, they don't throw their best punch. Like, Minnesota screws up in a lot of ways with the turnovers, letting Dallas bounce back with points off turnovers. This was a good Minnesota win. This team's got a lot of fight in them, man. And finally, we get the star performance that we have been waiting on from Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns throughout this series. This is not a great, like, collective win where you're getting a lot of punch from the supporting cast. You know, it's Cat and Ant handling business down the stretch. And as much as I dislike him, man, I have to tip my cap to Karl-Anthony Towns. He was the best player on the floor in this game. And as much as I dislike him, he's the best player in the second half. He balled out, man. We were all critical of him coming into this game. I was very critical of him. I've been taking a dump on him in every single game thus far. He answers the call, and I thought he was the best player on the court. So as much as I dislike the guy, I tip my cap to Cat, man. He's awesome.
Bro hit the as much as I dislike him more
like
times
Cat,
than
man.
I could believe.
I don't like Cat.
You know how I feel about Cat? Some dudes just get piled on by everybody. And so I just feel like clearly, no, but it's not always warranted, because after this game, watch, people will still hate on Cat. And what I really dislike about the Cat discourse is if you want to point out several very fair comparisons about what makes him frustrating as a basketball player, I totally get it. Like, we have seen the trend over the years of where he gets out of control on these drives. He can force the issue in isolation. And then there's too many turnovers and offensive fouls, and there's dumb defensive fouls. And I understand being frustrated with the complaining as well. But it is so deeply personal for so many people with the things that they say about Cat, the reasons that they cite as disliking Cat. SB Nation, Logan, posted an entire article today that was basically just like, by the author, I don't like Karl-Anthony Towns. Let me analyze every little micro detail of how he conducts himself, how he presents himself in a commercial. And I'm not saying this is the case with you. I'm not saying this is the case with a lot of people, because I do think there are very valid reasons to not like Cat. But I do think that the fact that he at times like has these feminine moments, I think homophobia is a reason that Cat is like so widely hated. Like, straight up. Think about how many comments that you see, just if we're speaking frankly, are people calling him gay as an insult. Like, that's so prevalent. And again, that is far from the universal case, but I absolutely think that that is a part of the reason that he is so hated. So when Cat balls out, I'm always going to appreciate it. And he was really good in this game, especially when it mattered most, because in the first half, like, this was a concerning performance from Minnesota's Stars, just because you felt like Ant came out so strong and they were so much better defensively, and Dallas's Stars were struggling so much. When you look up at the scoreboard and this is a tied ball game, just with how things have gone in second halves, with how things have gone in these closing stretches, how Dallas's two great shot makers have just stepped up and been so overwhelmingly great, and Minnesota had struggled, I was very concerned for them. And a big reason for that was the dumb plays by all their stars. They combined for 6 turnovers and 9 fouls by halftime. And a big problem in the first 3 games was just these dudes weren't mentally ready for the moment. Cat is taking bad shots. Ant is throwing the ball all over the floor. He's giving you costly turnovers. Dallas's dudes were consistently sharp and nails, but it was a complete reversal down the stretch. And Cat giving you 20 points in the second half is massive on its own. He does still foul out, but plays almost the entire fourth quarter. And that was really big. I also think it was a great play by Chris Finch to bring him back into the game with like 9.5 minutes left in the fourth, because normally when a guy is sitting with 5 fouls, like, you aren't comfortable bringing him in because you want him playing the closing stretch of the game, of course. But Naz Reid is such a luxury where it's like, okay, let's get Cat on the floor. He is still our best offensive big man. We want him out there. And let's see if he can finish this whole game without fouling out. Great. If he does foul out early, okay, then we just bring in Naz. Like, it's a unique situation where you don't have to be worried as specifically about having him in for those last 3 minutes of the game. And by the way, it wasn't even Naz. Like, they're closing with Kyle Anderson in this game. Just another testament to the depth of this team. And you talk about the supporting cast not doing as much in this game. You didn't have that one individual explosion like maybe you've gotten from Jaden McDaniels or Mike Conley, but I thought collectively the Minnesota supporting cast was still quite good in this game. But it's not just that Cat is making shots. It's the adjustment in his approach. Like, first of all, in that third quarter stretch, he's generally being pretty smart about how he attacks. The foul on PJ Washington was so stupid. He's never going to get that call. He clearly swings his elbow. PJ is vertical, jumping into the defender. Maybe there are some stars who refs love so much they might get that call, but that was a pretty obvious one. I don't think Luka even gets that call, dude. That was pretty bad. But he's attacking the paint. When Gafford's off the floor, there's no rim protection. He's getting downhill and he's getting easy buckets there. And then once he comes back in the fourth quarter, outside of the 1-3 that he took running pick and roll with Gobert that got blocked at the end, he didn't force anything. That has been the most frustrating thing about Cat. His shot has been completely off from deep, but he's forced some tough threes. And in isolation, he's been treating PJ Washington like it's a mismatch, and it just isn't. And he's really struggled, and he's been inefficient and out of control offensively in that matchup. He didn't do that in this one. And he didn't force finishes against Daniel Gafford, because you see that sequence when he comes back in. He has back-to-back shots blocked by Daniel Gafford. Yeah, and he got blocked by him in the first half as well. And like several times getting to that right hand, he just hasn't been able to go into the body of Gafford. He's lost that matchup physically. And then Gafford, just what an exceptional pure shot blocker. So he stops doing that. When he gets downhill and he draws the help, he's kicking those laydown passes to Gobert. He's creating really easy offense. He's relocating away from the ball. He's moving off screens. He's getting open threes, which are always going to be the best looks for Karl-Anthony Towns. So I just thought you got a lot of the good stuff from him. He fouls out. He complains. There are a lot of people who will choose to focus on that. But to me, his hyper-efficient 25 points in 30 minutes were absolutely massive. Also, though, this was a better Ant game from the jump. And you mentioned the aggression in the first quarter. It's not just the 14 points. It's the 8 free throws. And he misses 3 of them. But that is reflective of the value of just getting downhill, because we've talked about how Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively, who obviously doesn't play in this game, have transformed every playoff series, and especially this one, just with their constant presence as helpers. Ant has really struggled to finish at the rim in this matchup. I believe he's 12 of 27 inside of 5 feet in this series, 44%. It's just really tough to finish around Gafford, and he's so great at giving you these vertical contests, but there are more positive outcomes than just Ant making a layup. You get free throws, you create offensive rebounds, and alongside that, I thought he was really opportunistic in semi-transition, where the Timberwolves are setting him these high screens, and then he is just sort of comfortably drifting into these good, wide-open pull-up jumpers. And that was just a much smarter offensive approach. I thought down the stretch, he also just makes a couple really big shots. The step through, and then I loved how he hunted that open pull-up on basically the shot that ices this game, where Rudy's rescreening for him, right? But he is just navigating that screen. Gafford's in drop. He knows he's going to be able to get a good look at a pull-up jumper, and that pull-up jumper was mostly on in this game, and he hits a big one. And Rudy was better as well, particularly offensively. He had one of his better offensive games in this one, and there's still a couple of bad moments. He fumbles a catch early. He has an offensive foul or two. He has the spot where Cat throws him the ball in the post with the shot clock winding down, and he's just oblivious to the shot clock violation. But for the most part, it was one of his better finishing nights. He has the Euro. He has the lay down pass to a cutting Cat in the first half. He has another nice controlled finish in the second half. He's ready to catch and finish off those Cat lay down passes, and they're feeding him off mismatches, and he's drawing fouls. Now he misses 2 free throws off of the Luka foul that could have been huge if he had made those, but he was good enough offensively. And his ability to defend without fouling down the stretch was massive, especially with Cat fouling out at the very end of this game. But like, you just need Gobert on the floor defensively. And I thought he had a lot of really good moments on that end down the stretch, playing some really good drop coverage, keeping Kyrie and Luka away from the rim. They've been so great as difficult shot makers in this series that they've just been able to toast whatever coverage Minnesota throws at them, and particularly drop, because they've been so great with those intermediate shots, and they've still been able to create open looks for the rollers enough. But generally, as a defense, those are the shots that you want to force the opposing team, no matter how good those shot makers are, to make. And in this one, those shots didn't fall. And on the last play, he shows high. He forces Kyrie into a bad turnover. So he's playing with 5 fouls for an extended stretch of this fourth quarter. And with all those things compounding, I was worried for Minnesota because of the trend that we've seen. But it's like, especially when 2 of your best players can't confidently play super physical basketball, that's just a really concerning recipe. But they pulled through, and all those guys made big plays. And ultimately, this is probably too little too late for Minnesota because of how bad Ant and Cat were over the first few games of this series. But this is the version of those guys that they needed, and they got them in this one, and it was enough for them to pick up a big win.
Yeah, I was super nervous too in the closing stretch as well, just because again you're going up against Dallas, who's been the number one clutch offense in all of basketball, with Luka and Kyrie, arguably the best closing duo in basketball. We've seen this story 3 times. Minnesota goes into the fourth quarter with a lead, and also Kyrie got a little bit going in the fourth, where I was like, "Uh-oh, we're about to get classic Kai." I do want to give Rudy Gobert a ton of credit for what he did in disrupting Kyrie Irving. Like, I thought Kyrie's such a rhythm guy, man. Like, when he gets it going early, like, Kai can just get so hot so quickly. But it's like an avalanche kind of thing where Kyrie doesn't get going at all in this game. And then late in the game, he's passive, right? And he's just not as comfortable getting to his looks. He does hit that one nasty, like, left-handed floater off the offensive rebound. That was a great shot late.
The lefty finishing this whole series has been so ridiculous from him.
Absurd, dude. It is such a weapon to be able to go to. Him and Mike Conley both are fun watching those offhand floaters. Such a just valuable switch-up shot. But I thought Gobert really did a great job of affecting him throughout the game and making him just uncomfortable. That's all you can do with these star players, is to make them uncomfortable. And Kyrie wasn't around the rim. There's a lot of point-blank layups that Kyrie normally hits that he just smokes in this one, and I attribute a lot of that to Rudy. I also want to give Ant props for what he did playmaking and decision-making too. I want him, Carson, at points to be a little more aggressive, though. Like, in that second to third quarter, I thought he should have been a little more aggressive, but there's a few plays where he's got easy little mid-range pull-ups that I think you should just get into, that he's kicking out of. And I think that's just a byproduct of him being such a young player. Like, just that, he hasn't played as much basketball with these guys. He's not as comfortable. That's one area where I think Ant can be a little better, but this is still a phenomenal game from him. And big props to Kyle Anderson. A big shout out to Mike Conley, is such a steadying presence. He has a great first half when the other guys are struggling. Like, thank you for making that point. Like, I don't want to just discredit what the Minnesota supporting cast does overall. I just mean in terms of scoring punch, traditionally to what we expect from Minnesota, right? You don't get a torrential Naz Reid game. You don't get a crazy Kyle Anderson game. There's nobody giving you that big punch. But everybody was collectively solid. And moreover, it's just this defense. The one thing, I agree with you, too, that I think it's a little too late, right? We've never seen a comeback down from 3-0, obviously, in basketball. The closest we got was last year when Boston, goes down 3-0, comes back, forces a game 7. The one thing that I've been harping on, that the commentators have been harping on, I feel like every basketball analyst has been harping on, that I think Minnesota can do a better job of, and something that they implement in this game, is attacking Luka Doncic more defensively. You talk about when they get those switches on Gobert. Like, to me, Carson, I am involving his man in the action way more in all of these games. If it's Jaden McDaniels, him in the corner, Jaden, give me a screen. I want to pick on Luka, right? I'm just getting him involved in the action more. Or Gobert on the low block, I want to get him in foul trouble, right? I just want to have that mismatch where we can go at him. And I think Gobert can do a much better job of that. Gobert, dude, is a caribou on roller skates, man. He is a deer on ice skates, bro. He is so uncoordinated. My eyes popped out of my head when he hit that Euro and when he hit that little dump-off pass. But he just he is frustrating when he has those mismatches in the post. He has that one shot clock violation, dude, where he doesn't even Cat, bro, what are you doing? Did you have to shoot that ball? Like, you have to know that Rudy has no idea what time is on the clock. 2.5 seconds on the shot clock. Cat says,
Well,
yeah, man.
hold on. Why would you have to know that Rudy has no idea how much
Come
time is
on,
on the
bruh.
shot
Come on,
clock?
bruh. It's Rudy Gobert. He does not know what his time is on. His back is to the basket, bro. He does not know what is going on.
That was
I
kind of a
saw that.
lose-lose spot. I don't know.
Oh,
Cat was either going to huck up a really tough three. If Rudy had just gone quickly, he could at least get a decent shot over the top, or he's in really good position to grab his own miss. Cat shouldn't throw him the ball there, I guess. But again, it was going to be a bad outcome either way. I put it more on Rudy for being completely oblivious.
you're right, but that's the thing to me is either one, I'm just icing out Gobert in that situation, or Gobert just has to have the wherewithal. I've got a guy who I've got 8 inches on, bro. Just rise and put the layup up. Like you said, even if you miss it, you're going to get the offensive board. So that's the one area. I love the defensive intensity. I love the work on the glass. I love that we got out of Cat. If they can be better at limiting the fouls, limiting dumb mistakes and turnovers like that, and then attacking Luka deliberately more defensively, I think is a big key for Minnesota. You're just going to wear him down so he's not as he doesn't have as much energy on the offensive side of the floor. And then, look, man, I know it's kind of a whack move, but it's like Cat fouling out in the fourth quarter. Your hottest player went off the floor in the fourth quarter. And I'm not saying Luka's going to foul out, but if we can get him a little more passive defensively, right? Get him to have 3 or 4 in the third quarter. That's just an area where I think Minnesota can exploit Dallas even more defensively, is just deliberately going at him. I think it'll help out Minnesota in the long run, and I've been wanting them to do it for 4 games now. They do it a little more in this one, but I think they can implement it even more in their offense moving forward.
I don't disagree. I think that trying to involve Luka in the action as much as possible is just good process, because even though he has been solid defensively in this run, he is still their weakest individual defender and he's their best offensive player. And it's just generally a positive to try to make that guy work on the defensive end. The reason that hasn't just been an automatic avenue to good offense for them, like we see Ant draw that switch a few times in this game, is because Luka is a capable isolation defender. So that is not necessarily where you're attacking his individual weak point. And also, Dallas is so comfortable sending help in those spots and they load up the paints that it's like you still are probably going to have to beat them as a playmaker more than you're going to beat them as a scorer, right? You get a step on Luka, you're still either getting that mid-range pull-up, which I would like to see Ant confidently taking. As you mentioned, he passes up on a good look and just makes a totally out of control skip pass to Jaden McDaniels. That's a turnover. He has to take those shots. But as a defense, you're okay with that just mathematically. Or he's driving into packed paints, trying to finish where he struggled in this series just because your rim protection is so great. And he hasn't been able to make those skip passes. So that's why it's not like a super simple, oh, just attack Luka every time down and you're going to get great shots. But I still think you're right. It is good offensive process and it's something that they should do more. And they did do in this game. And it's easiest to attack Luka when you do get him matched up on a post player like Gobert, just because then you have the ability to post up on the interior. And if they're not going to send help there, well, Gobert's probably not going to make a shot, but he's probably going to draw a foul. I do want to give props to the Minnesota supporting cast, and particularly Kyle Anderson, because this isn't necessarily a performance that is going to show up on the stat sheet, but he closes this game. He plays 25 big minutes in this game. And you mentioned this, but some of the key plays to close this game, he's the one setting these off-ball screens for Cat, specifically on the corner 3 off of the Ant kickout. He literally directs Cat to drift to the corner. He sets a pin and screen. Like, that is just such high IQ basketball, such valuable stuff. Who do they want making that final inbound pass to Naz Reid? It's Kyle Anderson, who floats that beautifully over the defense. Like, he's just a winning basketball player. And he's been so good in this series and is always going to be awesome defensively. He just has so much length there and has such great hands and made a couple awesome plays in this game, has 3 steals. Like, that is so consistent. But his playmaking offensively, making reads, if it's as a ball handler, if it's as a short roller, and his shot making, like what he's done as an intermediate shot maker. We've talked about how when they don't guard him, he's punished them. Like, him giving you 7.5 points and 3.5 assists per game on 63% true shooting may not blow you away in this series, but when you consider what that allows you to benefit from in terms of his defensive contributions and his IQ, like that's big time stuff. And he was really, really good in this game. Mike Conley as well struggled just as a shot maker in game 1 of this series, but since then has been so steady, has been kind of their most consistent offensive player, because even Ant has had these really hot and cold stretches within these last 2 games when he has taken over. Conley is just getting such a steady diet of shots that he loves out of pick and roll, and a couple of really awesome lefty finishes. He's lefty, of course, but high off the glass over Gafford in this game. Like, he's 16, 3, and 5 on 65% true shooting over his last 3. And then Jaden McDaniels, last 5 games, 15 a night on 74% true shooting. Again, hits a mid-range pull-up in this game. Again, hits a couple of big threes off the catch. And most importantly, was excellent defensively. I thought did a phenomenal job navigating screens against Luka. You mentioned the ball pressure. This was just by far the best that he has held up physically, because Jaden McDaniels is absolutely one of, if not the best perimeter defender on the planet. But Luka is a unique matchup in that he is so ridiculously strong, and he's been able to bump Jaden McDaniels, move him around a bit, create separation for those mid-range looks and those short-range touch shots where he's just been super comfortable. I thought the refs did allow more physicality, but Jaden also just held up better there. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker had some really awesome moments defensively in this game on Kyrie, drawing an offensive foul on Luka. He gives you a steal and a block in this one, and at least makes 2 of his 5 threes. Like, he has been really struggling offensively. He was better in that respect in this one. So this wasn't a perfect game for Minnesota whatsoever, but it definitely felt much closer to the team that I expected to see coming into this series, where they are establishing such a high level defensively from the jump, and you are getting better versions of Ant and Cat, and the supporting cast is just so good. You just wish that you had seen this version sooner, ultimately, because they play their best game of the series. But again, it comes down to clutch execution. It comes down to stars in the first 3 games. And now you're digging yourself out of a hole that historically it has been impossible to dig yourself out of.
Yeah. And I think the one dynamic that obviously is a big change from the first 3 games in this series is that Derek Lively's out. And I do think that changed a lot of, it had a big ripple effect in this series, right? Anthony Edwards, the reason he's able to get downhill so much early, wouldn't change early because they normally start out with Gafford, right? They do shifts, right? They give 6 minutes to Gafford here, 6 minutes to Lively there. I do think it obviously hindered Dallas, and I think you could argue a lot of guys. I think Lively arguably has been the 3rd best player for the Mavericks in this series. His impact has been massive.
In this series, for sure, I would say.
Yeah, and I think you could argue overall in this playoff run, I would probably side with PJ, but there's a debate to be had there.
Derek Jones Jr. Let's not snub Derek Jones Jr.
Dude, they're all. This is like a
and Gafford, like the 3 through 6.
They're role players.
It's close,
dude. And shout out my boy Jaden Hardy in this game too, dude. I loved what we got from Jaden Hardy for his little stretch. I'm curious,
who is your personal choice for the 3rd best player?
I'd probably take Lively, just in terms of what he brings on both sides of the ball, like as a deterrent. Like Ant, I can confidently say, like, the Timberwolves get a lot more attempts easy in the paint that they're just not getting because Lively is just deterring them from going down there. And then the biggest dynamic, I thought Dallas did a really good job in transition in the fast break of capitalizing off of the turnovers. But in the half court, I think you see the fact that having Lively is that, just guy rolling hard to the basket. It allows Gobert to play that higher drop with a little more ease, right? They're not always having to worry about that guy coming from behind and having that backdoor lob threat. I think he was sorely missed in this game, and I think that was a big difference for Dallas. Obviously, the other big difference for Dallas is that you don't get superhuman Kyrie and Luka in this one. They combine for they go 13 of 31 from the field. Kyrie's off. Luka's just not as nails as he normally is. I do want to give Luka props for the playmaking in this one. Dude, some of the passes he's making, and Luka does this on a nightly basis, it seems, because he's one of the best playmakers ever. But some of the kickouts, like that one kickout he has to Kyrie under the basket with the left hand, I don't know how he sees Kyrie. I also don't know how he puts so much velocity on that basketball. Some of the weak side kicks are insane. There's a couple of plays that I really loved where he got into the teeth of the defense and he just waited. Like he just takes an extra second for the weak side corner guy to sink. It was mostly Mike Conley who was getting picked on, but he just waits an extra second for that weak side guy to take one or two more steps in, and he fires that pass to the corner. And I think they make 1-3. I think they miss another. Luka's masterful, but his shot making's off. Kyrie's shot making is off. And then you do get some nice punch from the bench, man. I thought we got good Dante Exum first half minutes, some good Josh Green first half minutes. He comes up with two passes that he just intercepts. Jaden Hardy comes in and gives you some fire, man. I didn't know Jaden Hardy could jump like that. That dunk left me speechless, man. And he gives you some punch off the bench. Like, this is a good game from the supporting cast. But I just thought the biggest difference in this game from other ones, man, is Dallas being a little more reckless with the basketball, Kyrie and Luka being off with their shot making, and then I really thought you felt Derek Lively out in this game. And shout out to Maxi Kleba. I thought he gave him great minutes off the bench. I'm not playing Dwight Powell. Like, if Kleba is good to go, I am giving him all of those minutes in Lively's absence.
100%.
He's more switchable. He's strong, he's stout, and he brings you that floor spacing. I know that his shot's been off in this playoff run, but I trust him way more with those minutes. But those are the dynamics that I thought were flipped on their head. But Lively's absence to me, Carson, is the biggest one. Like, I think he has been their third best player in this playoff run. If I had to pick somebody, it's him or PJ. It's really, and they're all great, but I would go Lively. To me, if Lively's out for the next game, that would be the difference to me. I would pick Minnesota to win next game if Lively's out. If Lively's healthy and ready to go, I think I pick Dallas to close this thing out.
I think that that's good logic. Like, the margins are clearly just very slim in this series. Every game has been so tight, and Lively has been awesome. Like, Gafford, I thought was really, really good in this game and had a bunch of awesome moments, saving plays at the rim defensively, and was super efficient as a finisher offensively. But Lively has been better overall in this playoff run. And more than anything, it's just the fact that you don't get to have like either one of them on the floor for 48 minutes. Dwight Powell, I have no idea why he got on the floor before Maxi Kleba in this game. In the big 2024, we don't need to be seeing Dwight Powell minutes. I absolutely agree. Just go small with Kleba. And it's like, yeah, you lack some rim protection. You also lack rim protection with Dwight Powell. So give me the better, more versatile defensive and offensive player. That's kind of a no-brainer, but ultimately Dwight Powell barely does even play in this game. For what it's worth, my take on the third best Dallas player in these playoffs, probably Derrick Jones Jr., just because he's been so good as a shooter, which is like the one thing with him that his performance can hinge on. If you can just leave him without getting punished, that's a problem. But he's been a really efficient offensive player. He's like over 10 a night on 60% true shooting, and then doing so many things well, weaponizing his athleticism as a cutter, running the floor hard in transition. You see another ridiculous lob to him in this game. And then to me, just being far and away the team's best perimeter defensive player. Like, PJ is defending well, but Derrick Jones Jr. has consistently taken on the toughest matchups and has done a really awesome job. So I just think it's that sort of all-around winning impact that has been so consistent, so bankable, whereas it's like PJ, boy, he can explode offensively. And we've seen that. And I've always said the most fun thing about him is doesn't matter how well he's shooting, he will not stop taking those shots if they're good looks. But it's less consistent with the defense. The offense isn't always as efficient. And Lively is really, really good, but I do think his role is ultimately a bit more simple. And maybe the fact that Gafford replicates so much of it makes me appreciate Derrick Jones Jr. a little bit more because it's a more unique value to this team.
I also think, Derrick Jones Jr. has also been really good at attacking closeouts. Like, that's the beauty of playing with Luka and Kyrie. When those guys are getting doubled, right, you're going to be facing one guy on you that's sliding over, and then the entire defense is rotating. And there's a couple plays in this game where, he's not like super explosive off the catch, but he's got a little bit where if he fakes you one way, he can explode the other. And he's just good at driving the lane. Like, that's valuable. Like, in this one, I think he sets up Gafford for an easy dunk off of a closeout, off of a Kyrie double. When you have a guy like, and they have to respect Derrick Jones Jr. as a shooter. And that's the beauty, is that he has a counter, right? PJ's good, but PJ can't attack closeouts the way Derrick Jones Jr. can. And then
PJ has attacked closeouts well, but yeah, he's not the same sort of
yeah.
athlete. And he's more likely going to get to that floater, whereas
Mhm.
Derrick Jones Jr. might just get all the way to the rim and punch on you.
And you make a good case too. Like he's more impactful on the glass, I think, and he's a real weapon in transition, dude. That guy has out of this world bounce. We have to come back with a better nickname, in my opinion, than airplane mode. I think that's kind of weak. Like I think we need to brainstorm on that and come up with something better than that. But that's a good case, man. But all of these guys, dude, the collective here just works so well. Like all these guys, I think you could make a legitimate case. If it's PJ, if it's Gafford, if it's Lively, if it's Derrick Jones Jr., all of those guys have played their roles really well, dude. That's interesting to me, though. I think I would go, man, I don't know. I think Derrick Jones Jr. might be my last guy out of that list. That's interesting.
Interesting. I don't think that there's a big margin. And also, I do want to be clear. I think PJ's been really good on the glass as well. So that's consistent value that he's brought. Ultimately, all these dudes are just doing their jobs quite well. And that's been a really crucial part of Dallas getting to where they are at this point. You mentioned Jaden Hardy. Absolutely. Like he has 10 points in that stretch of just a few minutes from the late third to the early fourth. And he just brings a unique dynamic in terms of his ability to create off the dribble, but also being a consistent, like really good 3-point shooter off the catch. It's just something that you don't necessarily have with Exum, even though the numbers would say that he was this year. I certainly trust Jaden Hardy more. I trust him more than Josh Green. I trust him more than Derrick Jones Jr., although they're not necessarily competing for minutes. Like the juice that he's provided with the playmaking as well, it's been valuable in this series, and it's been good to see him get some minutes. And Dallas has options in the deep bench. Both these teams have had so many lineup options throughout this postseason. It's an advantage that they've had over a lot of these other teams. Ultimately, though, although you do get some good performances from Derrick Jones Jr. and Gafford and Jaden Hardy in this game, like this comes down to Dallas's stars just getting outplayed by Minnesota's stars, which couldn't have been further from the case in the first two games of this series. And part of this is just the shot making not being there. But I want to give a lot of credit to Minnesota defensively because Jaden McDaniels was just consistently attached around all these Luka screens and up in his airspace. Ant defended Luka really well on several isolations. Kyrie, his shot quality just consistently was really, really difficult. So it was phenomenal in that respect for Minnesota. Like the Dallas star guards can make you pay no matter what you do defensively, no matter the coverage, no matter how tightly you cover them. They're just that special. But if you play really exceptional defense, like they can't do that every single night. And so finally, Minnesota reached the level they needed, and they got that little bit of fortune where the Dallas dudes weren't as locked in. So it's a really good win for them. But again, my biggest takeaway broadly is just you wish that you had gotten this version of Anthony Edwards sooner. You wish you had gotten this version of Karl-Anthony Towns sooner because Minnesota has had amazing opportunities in games 1, 2, and 3 where their supporting casts was just better and their stars were soundly outplayed. And I think that that's a very painful way to lose a series if they do end up losing. But this is a big win to keep your hopes alive. You go back onto your home court now. If Lively doesn't play, that is a big factor. And I tweeted out at tip-off, I did expect Minnesota to win this game just because backs against the wall with the Lively absence, knowing that you're just going to get some progression to the mean from a guy like Karl-Anthony Towns. They've played well in these desperate spots throughout the playoffs, and I thought that they very much did so in this one. Any final thoughts on this game and the remainder of this series, Logan, before we get out of here?
Yeah, I agree with you, right? Like I think Dallas is going to close this thing out. I would be foolish to predict anything else otherwise. It's literally never happened, but I do believe that Anthony Edwards and this team believe that you can't kill him. Like I loved the pregame package that we got Ant warming up, talking to his boys. I love Anthony Edwards as a leader, and that has shown. That's another aspect that I haven't liked, man. Like Ant, it's hard for a young player, man, like taking on that kind of responsibility as the team's vocal and mental leader. But we didn't get that Ant. Like I didn't feel like we kind of got that Ant in the first 3 games. And I don't know if it was the desperation of this game or what, but his mentality was different, the way he fired his guys up. And I know that Anthony Edwards believes in this team, and I know he believes that they're not going to go down. Like this team is going to fight hard as hell. What's your take? Are you with me? Does Lively's absence, determine the outcome of Game 5 to you?
I can't say for sure. It would
Mhm.
probably determine my pick. I think if Lively doesn't play, then I would take Minnesota to win because I do think in a lot of ways, like they're just the more complete basketball team, top to bottom. I do think that they are the better basketball team in that sense. So much of the difference in this series has been about stars carrying their weight. So if Minnesota Stars can play good basketball like they did in this one, then I do think that they have a good formula. But in the scheme of things, again, coming back from down 3-0 is exceedingly difficult to do. And there's a reason that you bank on the sort of star shot making and shot creation that you get from Dallas's dudes, because a lot of these games are going to come down to crunch time
Mhm.
execution. Like Minnesota's defense will keep them in it, and then it's okay who can produce the most down the stretch. Kyrie and Dallas have clearly proven to be much more reliable there. Kyrie, Luka, and Dallas, that is. All right, guys. Appreciate you tuning in as always. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, the good news is there is plenty more Nerd Sesh content. You can listen to all of our full shows across our YouTube channel. We are continually doing these nightly reaction shows. You can check us out across social, TikTok and Instagram at Nerd Sesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. You can listen to the show across audio platforms, and you can join our Discord to chat with the fellas. The link to that is at the link tree across our social media bios. You can also check out our merch at thevolume.com. And with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber,
I've been Logan Camden.
and this was Nerd Sesh.